Welcome back. Our next speaker will be Professor Jacques Savoy. Jacques is a professor of computer science at the University of Neuchatel, and his research focuses on natural language processing in general and multilingual information retrieval in particular. And he also develops tools to monitor the popularity of election candidates on the internet. So Jacques, whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
Thank you for this introduction. So with this project, we have a collaboration between my university, University of Neuchatel, and the institute called IFA in Bern. And the idea was not to predict the output of an election, but to see during the campaign what are the most important topics, what are the different positions, in this case, of the two candidates and the popularity of this candidate. In a third part, related more on my side, so we analyze the tweets sent by the candidate to have a better pictures of what are the important topics for them and how they are calling voters to vote for themselves. This research obtained a financial support from the Asler Stiftung in Bern. So monitoring the US election means, first, of course, there is two candidates, and what you want to know is what could be the winning chance of each of them candidate. The second part, more interesting for the candidate and the political scientist, is to know the main interest of the citizen. And the third one is what are the topics the candidate are talking about. So what we can do is estimate this, for example, if you are working for a political party, to organize polls. But in this case, it could be expensive. It takes time. You don't have the real-time pictures, and we want something close to the real-time pictures. Yes, and from time to time, there is problems. They are not always accurate, and we can have two examples, for example, the Brexit and the 26 US election as example. So for this application, we focus on the 2020 US election. So our first question is, can we have an idea, not perfect, about the popularity of the two main candidates? Second, what are the most important interest and concern about topics provided by the citizen, in this case, of course, the US one. And the third part is the political offer, what candidates are talking about. Thanks to IFA, we are able to follow online or to obtain online information. In this case, we have the opportunity to know how many search queries with this text appear on a given search engine. And to obtain a way to analyze the third part, the political offer, we look at tweets sent by the candidate. And certainly due to the pandemic situation this year, the use of Twitter was relatively important during this US election. So the assumption is the following. If you send a query about Donald Trump, gun control, you are more or less interested in the target topics or person. So what we can do, and what we have done, is to count the number of queries sent, of course, to search engine with a given name, for example, Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton for the last campaign, or known phrases, illegal immigration, gun control. To achieve this, we have a set of APIs, and each of these APIs is able to provide corresponding information. Let's say, take an example. Each day, we look with this API how many requests with Donald Trump appear in, for my example, Yahoo, Google, Instagram, My Search, Reuters, Twitter, Wikipedia, etc., etc. So you have this count per day, and we can, in this case, take an average if you want, or just the sum of these to have the number of queries sent by US citizens in this case, looking for an interest of the given person or topics. Start with the first question. The awareness or popularity of the corresponding candidates. So for us, the search volume is an indication about the popularity. So we start, in this case, March the 1st, with this value. 30% of the US citizens are really to vote for Democrat, another 30% for Republican, and 40% are independent. But if you look at the curves here, what we see that in the blue one, we have the Trump awareness or search volume, and in red one, the Biden one. And during the campaign from March the 1st to the end of the campaign, November the 3rd, there is a clear difference between the two candidates. And in this case, Donald Trump obtained clearly a higher volume than his opponent, Joe Biden. It's interesting to see a few points. For example, it was mid-April. In fact, Sanders leave the race to the White House. And at that time, we expect having a higher number of requests with the name Joe Biden. And in our analysis, we see it's not the case. So the problem with the Democrat nominees, in fact, the curve, the interest was relatively low during the entire campaign. And of course, during the last month or last week, there is a larger interest. Another example, we have in October the 1st, a tweet specifying that Donald Trump caught the coronavirus. And if you look at the number of queries, we start with 60 million of queries per day to close to 100 million. So just a simple event like this can have a real effect on our analysis. If we compare the two campaigns, the campaign 26-2020, what we can see here in this campaign, Trump obtained a larger support, larger number of queries than in the previous one. If we compare the two Democratic nominees, in fact, Hillary Clinton obtained a higher level in 26 than Joe Biden. So we have the clear impression that the campaign in this case was more in favor or against Donald Trump. If we look at the second topics of our research, what are the interests of the public? So what we have in our system is one headword like immigration, healthcare, and to map the interests in this topic, we formulate a lot of different either words or noun phrases. For example, we have in this case illegal immigration, Latin immigration, immigration rate, etc., etc. So all the count of the topic on a given noun phrases are count in the topic immigration. We have the same for healthcare, education, etc., etc. So after that, we can analyze the topics, the interest by the public, quantified by the number of search queries sent to these different search engines and social networks. If we focus on the important period of this election, starting in June up to November the 3rd, we discovered two very important topics. People are very interested by the COVID. And the second was, in fact, we call that job, we can replace jobs by unemployment rate. So if you look at the evolution of this interest, we are close to, let's say, between 30 and 40 million requests per day about these two topics. If we want to analyze a little bit the evolution of this topic, what we can see is first the unemployment rate in the US achieving a 14.7% in April and slowly going down to 6.7%. So it was clearly a real problem, but for the citizen, if you look at the normal unemployment rate, it's just below 4%, 3.8 or 3.7%. The second main topics were coronavirus. And if you look at the curve of, in this case, the number of deaths per month, we see a clear peak, the first one in April, and the second one starting in November and December. So this is the second most important topic in this election. So we have these two, the coronavirus and, in fact, the job. And from this, we can add other topics. I don't want to present everything, but we have, in this case, in yellow, the topic education. Clearly, there exists a topic, an interest in the public about the education, but this one is clearly lower than the coronavirus and job topics. The last one present in this slide is the Black Lives Matter. In Europe, there is a lot of newspapers or TV shows about this topic, but we see that this topic is not very important in the US election. If you look at the average number of topics per day, we are close to 1 or 2 million. And from time to time, there is a spike, a peak. So for example, here we have in August, the Jacob Black's shooting, and suddenly there is a larger interest for this topic. But after a few days, in fact, the level reached the basic level of 1 or 2 million. Of course, we can add other one. We have in this case, in gray, the immigration and the healthcare problem. So clearly, if you look at all these topics, we can specify that the two main was clearly the jobs and the coronavirus problems. Look at the third question. Candidates are talking about what? If you look just in tweets sent in September and October, there is two different strategies. The first one, if you look at the Republican one, there is a lot of tweets. 43 tweets per day against for Biden 14. Yes, so you have a large number of tweets sent by the Republican nominee. Interesting in this campaign, 52% of them is just retweet. So the incumbent president is just retweeting a lot, not generating a lot of new tweets. And if you look at the contents of the tweet, there is, in fact, an important aspect. Trump talked a lot about police and protesters. And if you look at the number of tweets appearing with the protest movement, we have close to 12%. And if we are look for the well-known police, different police, etc., we are close to 5.5% of the topic. And for example, I have put here the law and order. For some of them, in this case, law and order appear four times in the tweet in the Trump's thread. If we move to the Democratic candidate, we don't have this emphasis on police, but what we have is emphasis on the moral values. You have a lot of tweets about love, hope, honesty, etc. Many of them talk about symbolic notion, justice, nation, right, etc. And of course, Biden liked to add, in fact, the name of the people or entities corresponding to voter, Latinos, folks, Black voter, etc., etc. The strategy used by the Republican is to hopefully to provoke fear and anger about the citizen. So it's a well-known strategy used by Trump during the previous and this election. In fact, is to provoke the reader to include, in fact, anger with them. And it was a well-known strategy that such way included usually more voter, and voter will vote, will not stay at home and will vote if they are angry. Our system is able to extract a few topics or a few tweets corresponding to the Republican and Democratic parties. We have the first one. The Republican underline often that they are able to create new jobs. And the second tweet is an example of specifying if you vote for the Democrat, you will have a raise in the murder rate. And they provide some example, in this case of city, in fact, where the mayor is a Democrat person. On the other hand, on the Democrat Party, we have this idea about moral value, provide, in fact, by the Democrat leader, compare usually with what virtue can be characteristic with this Trump administration. And of course, Joe Biden appears as a good leader, able to talk to all Americans. In my conclusion, the situation is the following. We have a system using counting the number of requests sent to different search engines, able to analyze the popularity of the candidate during an election. We are, in some sense, able to have an idea about the political demand of the citizen, looking with the same strategy, the number of queries sent by citizens, and looking for the political offer. What we have done is to look at tweet and the content of the tweet and also the rhetoric of the tweet. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Jacques, for the nice presentation. We have a question from, we have many questions from the audience. The first one is by Philippe Eger, who's asking how inaccurate really were the polls on the 2016 presidential election or the Brexit?
I don't remember exactly, but in fact, the prediction was in this case that the Brexit will, in fact, lose the referendum.
So for the Brexit, it was very close, yes, and the final result was 52% for the Leave.
Yes, but yes, and maybe this is the real problem. If you are close to the 50%, it's very difficult to have a good prediction.
Okay, thank you. We have another question by Pasquale Di Cesare, who's asking, so maybe it is a bit off topic, but I wonder if you can comment on if and how machine learning and synthetic data can be used to detect possible election anomalies or fraud, maybe.
That's a difficult question for me. Prediction is not my job. I'm just looking for the monitoring evolution. My concern is if you do some prediction, the question is, are past data good data to predict the future? There is so many changes in the society, and maybe past data are not so good to have a very good prediction for the future data.
Okay, thank you. And one last question by Roy, who's asking how sentiment or attitudes towards candidates are incorporated in your analysis. Directionality in combination with attention, popularity may make the analysis more informative.
Yes, this is a very good question and very important. We were very surprised. It was not a surprise that Trump used a lot of emotion. Trump is an emotional guy. It's important. The feeling is important for Trump. And with hope, or we think that the Democrat Party will have the same strategy, including negative ads on this campaign. Big surprise, no negative ads by Joe Biden. They just specify, I am here to restore the moral value of the United States, and I am very different than the previous president. Okay. A surprise, in fact, we need certainly to analyze this.
Okay, thank you very much.
Welcome.
So yeah, thank you again for your presentation. We're running a little bit late, so we'll now take a very short break, 2 minutes, and then we'll be back with our next speaker. Thank you again, Jacques, and have a good day.
Thank you.